Malik had always been drawn to colors, shapes, and the power they held to convey deep emotions, something he had experienced growing up in a neighborhood where every street corner, every alleyway, and every graffiti-covered wall told a story. Yet, despite the rawness and emotion woven into his canvases, his work had rarely received the recognition it deserved. He was still a nobody in the art world, an unknown artist painting his truth in a world that often overlooked people like him. The small studio in which he worked had become his sanctuary, a refuge from the harsh judgment of society and the scorn he had often encountered from those who couldn't see past his skin color or the roughness of his background. Malik was a black artist trying to break into a predominantly white, elitist art scene, but the road had been long, and it seemed as though the doors were constantly being slammed in his face. His paintings, often filled with powerful depictions of struggle and triumph, remained unsold, collecting dust in his cramped studio apartment. In the dim light of his studio, he stood in front of his latest work, a bold piece that merged abstract colors with striking images of historical figures from his community, leaders, activists, and everyday people who had fought to survive and thrive in a world that had long been indifferent to their existence. This piece, unlike any other he'd created before, was a reflection of his journey, a bold statement about the need for visibility and respect. He had poured his soul into it. But no matter how much time he spent perfecting his craft, it never seemed to be enough for the art establishment. Tonight, though, there was a sense of urgency. He had been invited to an exclusive art show, an event hosted by one of the most influential figures in the art world, Darren Wilkins, the owner of the Wilkins Art Gallery. Darren was a man known for his expensive tastes and even more expensive opinions. To most people, Darren represented the epitome of success in the art world, wealthy, influential, and ruthless in his pursuit of the next big name. He was also notorious for his dismissive attitude toward artists who didn't fit his narrow definition of worthy. And yet, despite all of this, Darren's gallery was a place every artist dreamed of being seen. Malik wasn't naive. He knew Darren's track record. It wasn't about talent. It wasn't about the authenticity or emotion of the work. It was about marketability. If you didn't fit Darren's idea of what was valuable, then you might as well have been invisible. Still, this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Maybe tonight, for once, he could prove that he had something worth noticing. Even if Darren wouldn't admit it, maybe tonight he would see Malik's work for what it truly was, something extraordinary. As Malik finished getting dressed in his best clothes that weren't too fancy, but still respectable enough for the occasion, he took a deep breath. He had to walk in there like he belonged, even though every inch of his body told him he didn't. He wasn't the polished, refined type that Darren usually fawned over. But he was an artist, and that alone made him deserving of a place in the gallery. He took one last look at his painting, ensuring it was secure in the backseat of his car. Tonight, his work would have its first real test. He hoped it would pass. He had put everything into this piece. The Wilkins Art Gallery stood on the corner of one of the wealthiest streets in the city. It was a sleek, modern building with tall glass windows, glowing from within, the kind of place that demanded attention from everyone who passed by. As Malik entered, the sharp, sterile scent of polished wood and fresh paint hit him immediately. The atmosphere was sophisticated, almost cold, as if to remind everyone that art was a commodity, not a conversation. Guests milled about, sipping wine and exchanging pleasantries, each person more put together than the last. The crowd was predominantly white and affluent, their laughter and chatter mingling with the soft hum of classical music playing in the background. Malik stood out immediately, his dark skin contrasting with the crisp white of his shirt and the deep brown of his tailored slacks. He felt a little out of place, but forced himself to stand tall. He didn't have time for insecurity tonight. As he walked deeper into the gallery, Malik's eyes darted to the walls, taking in the paintings displayed in each sleek frame. He tried to suppress the feeling that he didn't belong here, but it was impossible not to notice the vast difference in style and content. The pieces that surrounded him were all variations on the same theme, whitewashed, abstract landscapes, impersonal sculptures, and minimalist designs that looked more like they belonged in a corporate office than a place dedicated to the power of art. But even amidst this sea of inoffensive, sterile works, Malik could see the difference. His paintings, vivid, emotional, and unafraid of discomfort, would stand out like a beacon in this monochrome world. If he could just get people to see his vision. At the center of the room, the gallery owner himself, Darren Wilkins, stood in conversation with a well-dressed couple. His back was straight, his hair meticulously combed, and his eyes gleamed with the arrogance of someone who had built his empire by controlling the narrative of the art world. When Darren saw Malik approaching, he raised an eyebrow. The disdain in his expression was subtle, but it was there. It was as if Darren could already sense that Malik wasn't the type of artist he usually welcomed into his space. Malik walked up to him, feeling the weight of every eye in the room as they shifted toward him. He cleared his throat, putting on a smile. "Mr. Wilkins, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Malik." Darren gave him a cursory glance, before turning his attention back to the couple. "Oh, yes, I've heard of you. Malik, right? Well, I must admit, I'm surprised you made it. Not many artists get the privilege of being part of this evening." Malik's heart sank. He'd known this wouldn't be easy, but the condescension in Darren's tone made it feel worse than he anticipated. "Well, I'm here to show you my work," Malik said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I believe it has something unique to offer." Darren didn't even look at him as he dismissed the statement with a casual wave of his hand. "I'm sure it's fine," he said, barely masking the derision in his voice. "But you must understand, art like yours, it doesn't sell well here. It's not the kind of thing that moves people, at least not the kind of people who can afford it." The words stung, but Malik refused to let them show on his face. "Maybe you just haven't seen the right piece yet." Darren raised an eyebrow, intrigued, despite himself. "Oh? Do enlighten me." Malik gestured toward the back of the room. "I brought something with me. You'll see what I mean when you look at it." Darren sighed as if he was being asked to indulge a child. "All right, let's take a look then. I suppose it can't hurt to see this masterpiece of yours." Malik led Darren to the back of the gallery where his painting was displayed on an easel. He stood back, watching Darren's expression carefully as the gallery owner surveyed the piece. It was quiet for a few moments, and then Darren finally spoke. "Well, this is unexpected," he said slowly, his tone dripping with false politeness. "But it's still not the kind of thing that will get you in here regularly. I'm sure there's some niche market for it, but this isn't what the real collectors are looking for." Malik felt his blood pressure rise. He was used to people like Darren underestimating him, but it never got any easier. He could feel the dismissive air surrounding Darren's every word. Still, he didn't back down. "You might be surprised. This is just the beginning." Darren gave him a half-hearted smirk. "We'll see, won't we?" he said dismissively. "But for tonight, enjoy the show. It's an honor just to be here." Malik stood in silence for a moment, letting the words wash over him. But inside, he knew he had to prove Darren wrong. He wasn't just an artist, he was a force waiting to be recognized. And tonight, the world would start to see it. The night wore on, and Malik tried to stay composed as he wandered the gallery, his gaze shifting from the artwork to the people around him. Darren's dismissal still stung, but Malik knew it was just a part of the game. He had seen it all before. People like Darren had built their empires by dismissing artists like him. But Malik wasn't here to play by their rules. He was here to make his own. As the evening dragged on, Malik's nerves started to settle, and the feeling of being out of place began to dissipate. He reminded himself that art wasn't about validation from people like Darren. It was about expression, about creating something that spoke to the soul, something that couldn't be ignored. And tonight, he had hoped that maybe Darren would see that. But instead, Darren's attitude had only confirmed what Malik had already known. This was a world where only the elite mattered. It wasn't about talent or emotion, it was about who you knew, how much money you had, and how easily you could be molded into something that fit the accepted narrative. Malik found himself standing alone near the back of the gallery, where his painting hung on a bare wall. The crowd had shifted, and most of them had moved toward the main exhibit, but a few lingered near his work, whispering among themselves. He overheard fragments of their conversations, words like unusual, bold, and striking, but nothing that indicated true appreciation. In the midst of his reflection, a voice broke his thoughts. "Well, I've seen it all now." Malik turned to find Darren standing next to him, arms folded across his chest, a thin, almost pitying smile on his lips. "I must admit, I wasn't sure what to expect," Darren continued, scanning the painting again, "but now that I've had time to think about it, I can't say I see what's so special." Malik felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't unexpected, but it still irked him. "What do you mean?" Darren looked at him as if he were speaking to a child. "Come on, Malik. You really think a piece like this is going to sell? No one wants to buy that kind of art. People want to invest in something they can hang on a wall without anyone raising an eyebrow." Malik's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Maybe they're not looking at it the right way. Art isn't supposed to be safe, Darren. It's supposed to make people think, to challenge them." Darren chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, I get it. You're an artist for the people, right? You want to be the voice of the oppressed. But this isn't the place for that. This gallery is for serious collectors, the ones who understand the value of art, not some naive notion of challenging the system." Malik could feel the blood rushing to his face. He had dealt with this kind of condescension his entire life, but it still had a way of digging under his skin. "You're right about one thing," Malik said slowly, his voice even, "this isn't the place for that kind of art. But the right people will see it for what it is. And they'll understand." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Really? And who exactly are these right people?" "The people who've been too busy collecting pieces like this," he gestured to a minimalist sculpture nearby, "to even notice that there's something real out there." Malik nodded. "Exactly." Darren's smirk faded as he leaned in slightly, his tone turning more dismissive. "You're wasting your time, Malik. Art like yours doesn't make it in this world. It's too raw, too real. People want something they can hang above their fireplaces, not something that makes them question their entire existence." Malik held his ground, staring Darren down. "Maybe that's the problem. People are too comfortable. They've forgotten what art can do. But that's going to change. You'll see." Darren laughed, his voice cold. "You're an idealist. That's cute. But in this game, idealism doesn't pay the bills." The word stung, but Malik didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a sharp, knowing smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe not. But it sure can build a legacy." Darren rolled his eyes. "You keep dreaming, Malik. But don't say I didn't warn you when this doesn't work out." With a final, dismissive glance, Darren turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the spacious room. Malik stood there for a moment, his heart racing. It would have been easy to give in, to let Darren's words discourage him, but he wasn't about to let anyone dictate his future, not even someone as powerful as Darren Wilkins. As the evening wore on, the room began to empty, and Malik found himself standing alone in front of his painting once more. The gallery was starting to clear out, and the cold, distant air of exclusivity seemed to settle deeper into the atmosphere. Despite everything, Malik remained undeterred. He had something Darren couldn't see, something that no amount of elitism or industry power could take away from him, his authenticity. The painting was his truth. It wasn't about fitting into someone else's idea of what art should be. It was about creating something that was his, something that resonated with his life, his community, and the stories he wanted to tell. And one way or another, the world would hear it. Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. He glanced down and saw a message from his best friend, Kayla. "You got this. They'll see it soon enough. Keep pushing." The words made Malik smile. Kayla was one of the few people who had always believed in him, even when the world seemed determined to prove him wrong. She had been there from the start, helping him find his voice when he felt lost in the noise of the art world. He typed a quick reply, "Thanks, Kayla. I'll keep at it." As he slipped his phone back into his pocket, Malik felt the last of his frustration melt away. He knew what he had to do. The night wasn't a loss, it was just the beginning of something bigger. But there was something else he had to do now. Malik turned toward the front of the gallery, his mind set. Darren had written him off, but he wasn't done yet. It was time for Malik to show him just how wrong he was. If Darren thought Malik's work was worthless now, he'd soon find out just how much he had underestimated the artist standing before him. The next few days passed in a blur for Malik. Despite Darren's dismissive attitude, the interactions at the gallery had ignited a fire within him. It wasn't just about proving Darren wrong anymore. It was about showing the world that there was more to art than what people like him had decided was valuable. Malik's work wasn't a trend or a passing phase, it was real, raw, and undeniably powerful. It deserved a place in the world, even if that world was unwilling to acknowledge it. As he sat in his cramped studio, Malik stared at the painting he had brought to Darren's gallery. He had placed it carefully in the center of the room, just as he had at the event, and now he studied it in the quiet of his own space. The colors seemed to speak to him, and the figures he had captured, Black leaders, activists, family members, felt alive on the canvas. Each stroke of paint was a tribute, each layer an acknowledgement of history and resilience. He had put everything into this piece, and now he had to find a way to make sure others saw it, too. Malik's phone buzzed again. It was a message from his lawyer, Ethan, who had been handling some of the business side of things for him. Got a call from an anonymous collector. They're interested in some of your work. They said they're willing to pay top dollar for a piece that matches your style. Malik raised an eyebrow. This wasn't the first time someone had inquired about his art through Ethan, but these were usually vague requests that led nowhere. He quickly typed a response. Do they want to see my latest work? The one I showed at Wilkins? They're very interested in that one. They want to make a deal as soon as possible. I'll set up a meeting if you're ready. Malik's heart began to race. This was exactly what he needed, an opportunity to prove that his art was worth something more than Darren's dismissive comments. If someone was willing to pay top dollar for his work, maybe he could turn this into something bigger. Maybe he could show Darren, and the rest of the world, that Malik's art was far more valuable than anyone realized. He quickly replied to Ethan, "Set it up. I'm ready." A few days later, Malik found himself sitting in the office of a sleek, upscale art dealership. The room smelled of expensive leather and polished wood, and the walls were lined with rare works from renowned artists. Malik felt a little out of place, but he kept his head high. He wasn't just here to sell his work, he was here to change the narrative. Ethan had arranged everything. The meeting was with a high-profile art collector, a wealthy business tycoon known for his extensive collection of contemporary and rare art. Malik had never met him in person, but he had heard rumors of his discerning taste and his ability to spot potential in up-and-coming artists. As he waited in the spacious, minimalist office, Malik's nerves slowly began to calm. He had been here before, waiting for opportunities to materialize, but this time felt different. This time, he wasn't desperate. He wasn't looking for approval from people like Darren. He was here because his work had value, and it was about time someone else saw it too. The door opened, and a tall man entered. His sharp suit and confident stride made it clear that he was a man who had everything under control. The man extended a hand, and Malik shook it firmly, not bothering to hide the determination in his gaze. "Malik, I presume? I've heard good things about your work. I have to say, I'm impressed by the pieces I've seen online," the man said, his voice smooth and calculated. "Thank you," Malik replied, his voice steady. "I'm glad you're interested." The man smiled, though it seemed more out of politeness than genuine warmth. "Let's not waste any time. I'm here because I've been watching your career closely. You've got something special, Malik. Your art, raw, emotional, and deeply personal, is exactly what I'm looking for. But there's one piece in particular that caught my eye. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He already knew which piece the man was referring to. It was the one he had shown at Darren's gallery, the same one Darren had dismissed so carelessly. The one with the black leaders and activists? The man continued, his gaze sharp. I think it has potential to fetch a lot more than you might realize. I'd like to purchase it. And I'm willing to pay top dollar for it. Malik's mind raced. Top dollar? This was the kind of offer he had always dreamed of, but hearing it now was still surreal. This wasn't just about making a sale, it was about validating everything he had fought for. His work wasn't just art, it was history. It was a statement. He leaned forward slightly, matching the man's intensity. I'm glad you see the value in it. But I want to be clear, I'm not just selling my work. I'm changing the way people see it. This piece represents something bigger than just a painting. It's about visibility, about making sure stories like mine are told. So if you want it, you'll need to pay what it's truly worth. The man regarded him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded, slowly. Fair enough. We can come to a price. But make no mistake, Malik. You're not just selling a painting to me. You're selling your legacy. This is a piece that will change the way people view art. Malik's chest swelled with pride. He had expected to negotiate, but this felt different. This wasn't about haggling over prices, it was about making a statement. And he was ready to make that statement loud and clear. A week later, Malik's painting was sold for a price that far exceeded anything he had ever imagined. The deal was a game-changer, not just financially, but symbolically. The collector's purchase of his work was a statement in itself, one that proved art wasn't just about fitting in with the established norms. Malik's work had a place in the world, and people were starting to recognize that. The sale was a ripple, the beginning of something much bigger. Malik knew that the art world would never be the same again. But he also knew that Darren Wilkins, the man who had mocked him just days before, was still out there, believing that his vision of art was the only one that mattered. Malik smiled to himself as he stood in front of his easel once more. This was just the beginning. He wasn't finished yet. Malik hadn't expected the success of the sale to come so quickly. He had always known that art, especially art like his, was something that needed time to be understood. But there was something undeniably satisfying about seeing his work being valued the way it should be. The money was one thing, but the respect that came with it was what truly mattered. Yet, there was still something nagging at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't truly won. The art world, despite all of its high-flying buyers and sellers, was still dominated by people like Darren Wilkins, who treated the value of a piece not by the depth of its meaning, but by the shallow, commercial lens they viewed art through. Malik couldn't let Darren get away with his dismissive attitude. He couldn't let someone like him continue to dictate what was and wasn't worthy of admiration. Malik knew what he had to do next. It was time to return to the gallery, not as a defeated artist, but as someone who had something worth fighting for. He wasn't going to let Darren's opinion, or anyone else's, dictate his future. The gallery was quieter this time. The crowd from the opening night had long since gone, leaving behind a few pieces of broken conversation and some faded memories of the previous evening. Darren was at his desk in the corner, buried in paperwork, unaware of Malik's arrival. Malik strode across the floor, his shoes clicking softly against the polished marble. He'd come here with purpose, not to simply drop off a painting or to discuss terms for another show, but to make a statement. He had a new level of confidence now, the kind that comes when you realize you're worth more than what people are willing to pay. And Darren needed to hear that. The bell above the door jingled softly, but it was enough to catch Darren's attention. He glanced up, his face lighting up in a brief moment of recognition, before settling into the usual smug mask. Well. If it isn't Malik. Back again so soon? Darren's tone was condescending, but it didn't faze Malik. He had bigger things on his mind than Darren's usual sarcasm. Actually, I'm here to talk business, Malik said, his voice calm and even. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say, thank you. Darren raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. Thank me? For what? Malik smiled, though there was no warmth in it. For the inspiration. Darren frowned, clearly not understanding. Inspiration for what? For realizing that the art world isn't just about the people who sit at the top of the food chain, Malik said, his tone sharp. It's about the stories that get ignored, the voices that go unheard. And while you may not understand it, I'm going to make sure the world does. Darren's expression hardened, but there was something else there now, something Malik couldn't quite place. You know, Malik, I thought you were different. I thought you were an artist, not some activist trying to make a political statement. But maybe I was wrong about you. Maybe this is just about playing the game, right? You sell out, get famous, and then move on to the next big thing. Malik's eyes narrowed. This was the part where he could either give in or show Darren just how little he understood about art. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about fame or money. It's about telling stories that matter, stories that reflect who we are. People like you, people who think art is about what's in fashion or what's easy to sell, miss the point entirely. But that's okay. I don't need your approval anymore. Darren's lips curled into a tight smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. So, what is it you're really here for, Malik? You didn't come here just to lecture me, did you? No, Malik replied firmly. I came here to show you that your idea of what's valuable in art is wrong. And I came here to let you know that you'll never define what's worth something in this world, not with your money or your influence. Malik paused for a moment, letting the words hang in the air before continuing. The painting I showed here, it sold for more than you could ever imagine. A collector bought it for a price that you'd scoff at, but it was exactly what it was worth. I didn't need you or anyone else to tell me that. Darren's eyes narrowed, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. Sold? You're telling me that piece sold? Malik nodded, his confidence unwavering. Yes. And I'm not done yet. This is just the beginning. Darren's posture shifted slightly, as if he were considering the gravity of Malik's words. Well, I'll admit. I didn't think it was worth much at all. But if you're telling me the truth, I guess I was wrong. You were, Malik replied, stepping a little closer, his presence filling the room. And that's why I'm here today. To remind you that art doesn't belong to the rich or the elite. It belongs to anyone who's willing to see the truth in it. There was a moment of silence, the weight of Malik's words hanging heavily between them. Darren didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice a little softer, but still laced with a hint of skepticism. You really believe that, don't you? He asked. I do, Malik said firmly. And I'll keep pushing until everyone else does too. Darren looked at Malik for a long moment before finally nodding, though his expression was hard to read. Well, I'll give you this, Malik, you've got guts. But it'll take more than that to make it in this world. You'll need more than just a painting and some good intentions. Malik wasn't offended. He had heard it all before. I'll figure it out, he replied simply. Just remember, when the time comes, don't say you didn't know who I was. With that, Malik turned on his heel and walked out of the gallery. He didn't look back. He didn't need to.